Today on Alex Autos, we're out here taking a look at the 2015 Ford Fusion. This is also known in certain world markets as the Ford Mondeo because this car is part of Ford's recovery plan. It's also known as the One Ford or One World plan. Whereas in the past, Ford has designed and marketed two different vehicles for Europe and the Americas and certain other world markets, they now have just one vehicle. They have the Fusion, which now competes with the Camry, the Accord, the Altima, the Mazda 6, etc. in the United States. And then they have the Ford Mondeo in Europe, which has a very different kind of competitive set because the Camry and the Accord as we know them in this country don't exist over there. You'll have to pardon the pun, but this Ford really is a fusion of European and American tastes. And I think that's really why this has been selling so well in the United States. This is now in the top 4 mid-size sedans in this country. A large part of the Fusion's success in America can be seen right up front because this is easily the most attractive front end, in my opinion, in this mid-size sedan category. And I really haven't heard too many people saying they prefer other front end looks to the one we're seeing right here. This is sort of Ford meets Aston Martin meets giant goldfish or enormous mouth right up front. The look is very attractive and we're starting to see some copycat design themes from some of the competition out there, but this really is the original with this trapezoidal grille going on up front, very vertical front end, and these very attractive headlamps that are somewhat squished by the hood, giving it a little bit more of an angry theme. There's also an optional radar cruise control module that would clutter up the front just a little bit. The previous version of the Ford Fusion and the previous version of the Mazda 6 were very closely related because Ford and Mazda did an awful lot of co-development with one another. That's not going on in this generation. It's very noticeable when you compare this side by side with the Mazda 6. Mazda has gone for a very different kind of proportion in their latest version of the 6. That's part of why that Mazda looks so attractive as well. We have a much longer distance between this front tire and the front door in the Mazda as a result of what's going on under the hood. It gives it a little bit more of a rear-wheel drive proportion. However, in the Fusion, this proportion gives us more interior space than we get in that Mazda 6. At 191.8 inches long, this is longer than most mid-size sedan entries in the United States, except for that Chrysler 200, which is a little bit longer. As a result of that length, it should be obvious that the Ford Mondeo in Europe is a very different kind of vehicle in a very different segment than the Ford Fusion, because we love big vehicles in America, but this categorizes itself as a mid-size sedan in this country, and 191 inches long is a very big sedan for Europe. Part of the reason the Fusion looks so attractive from this angle is this roofline right here. You notice a lot of vehicles have a faux drop where the roofline actually stays quite high, but the glass line starts dropping right here, and that's not happening in the Ford. In the Ford, the roof is actually starting to drop right around here at the B pillar, and it's going down all the way down here to this very small trunk lid. That means that we get some reduction in rear headroom, which we'll cover a little bit later. I think that the rear end of the Fusion lets us down just a little bit, but only because the front end of the Fusion is so attractive. I do think that the Mazda 6's rear end is probably the most attractive in the segment, but overall I still have to give the win to the Ford Fusion in general. We have these tail lamps that go all the way across from the body onto the trunk lid. The trunk lid is very vertical, as you can see right here. There's not a whole lot of bumper that sticks out beyond the trunk. Our particular model has a single exhaust tip right over there on the passenger side. If you got the 2-liter turbocharged engine, you'd end up with dual bright exhaust tips across the back. There have been a few changes under the hood for the 2015 model year in the Fusion. There is no longer a 6-speed manual transmission offered in any version. Things start out with a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine at 175 horsepower and 175 pound-feet of torque. The big thing now is we now have a 1.5-liter turbocharged engine optional in the SE model at 181 horsepower and 185 pound-feet of torque. This essentially replaces the 1.6-liter turbo model that we saw in the Fusion previously. The change from 1.6 liters to 1.5 liters has nothing to do with the United States. It is again part of Ford's One World strategy, where in certain world markets, 1.6-liter engines are taxed at a slightly higher rate than 1.5-liter engines. The third engine option in the Fusion is a 2-liter turbocharged engine. It produces 240 horsepower when you're operating on premium unleaded, 231 on regular unleaded, and 270 pound-feet of torque. If you get this 2-liter engine, you can get an optional all-wheel drive system for $2,000. All three of those engines are mated to a standard 6-speed automatic transmission for the 2015 model year. There's also still available the 2-liter optional hybrid system, which uses a 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine, produces 141 horsepower all by itself, 188 system horsepower in the regular hybrid model, 195 system horsepower in the energy model. For the details, I'll let you refer to the chart over on your left, but if you get this 1.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, which we're taking a look at right here, your fuel economy will end up at 24, 36, 28 combined. You'll get 1 extra mile per gallon if you choose the optional start-stop system. Big takeaway for me, however, is that getting the 2-liter turbocharged engine, which gives you an awful lot more power, doesn't really drop your fuel economy a great deal. You end up at 22, 33, 26. Of course, the most fuel-efficient model will be the hybrid model with 42 miles per gallon combined, and that is after Ford has continued to adjust their hybrid fuel economy due to some errors in the way it was calculated when the Fusion was initially launched. Front seat comfort for me comes in at 9 out of 10 points. We have this multi-way adjustable driver's seat, 3-position power memory on our particular model. We also get a manual tilt telescopic steering column, which I can't find the lever for, that has a decent range of motion. The front seats in the Fusion are a little bit narrower than you'll find in some of the competition. That means that larger drivers and larger front passengers may find this a little bit less comfortable than I did. The back seats are where the Fusion lets us down just a little bit. It's not legroom. You can see this front seat's adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, and I have about 6 inches of legroom left right back here. It's very generous on the legroom front. The seat bottom cushion is also not too close to the floor, so it's a little bit more comfortable for an adult to sit right here. My thighs aren't going to get tired. If, however, I lean back in this seat, you'll notice that the headroom is a problem. I have to actually cock my head to the side in order to fit upright in this back seat. It's all down to the sexy side profile we have in the Ford Fusion. Moving over to the middle seat, things are just a little bit worse because the middle seat is a little bit above these two outboard bucket seats. However, if I move all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, suitable for a 6'5" passenger, and I have no problems fitting my legs right here behind that seat. I can even stretch them out just a little bit so that way my thighs are right here on the bottom seat cushion and sit fairly comfortably. You should know that the optional sunroof does reduce headroom just a little bit in the passenger compartment in the Ford Fusion. Still, I could sit right back here relatively easily if I slouched just a little bit. All 3 rear passengers get adjustable headrests. We also have a center console that's softly padded and has 2 very large cup holders. If I recline this rear seat back down, you'll notice that it folds almost completely flat with the cargo area in the back. Overall, I'm going to give these rear seats 6 out of 10 points when it comes to rear seat comfort because the headroom is more limited than you'll find in the average midsize sedan category. Although the rear passenger accommodations in the Fusion are limited, we do have a very important safety innovation right back here. I've always loved improved safety gadgets and safety technologies, and so this really speaks to my heart. It's an inflatable seatbelt, and you'll find it really only on Ford and Lincoln models. It has this large exaggerated buckle right down here because that's where the inflator for the airbag basically that's in this seatbelt is located. And then we have this chunky seatbelt portion right here. It means that there are 2 different ratchets. There's one that comes up from the seat bottom and then one that comes out from the seat back as well. In the event of an accident, this will actually pop open and become about 3 times its initial size. The reason you want that, and the reason this inflatable seatbelt is shaped the way that it is because it keeps the airbag right here across your chest. So in the event of an accident, it becomes larger and helps distribute those forces a little bit more broadly across your chest, across your collarbone, etc. This means you have a much lower likelihood of breaking ribs, breaking collarbones, etc. Because I love safety gadgets, this is a $150 option that I would definitely buy on any Ford or Lincoln product in which it's available. An important thing to know is that this was designed for child seats, so you can use this with most child restraint systems. However, you should check with child restraint manufacturers before you use it. So if you're using a particular child seat, be sure and contact that manufacturer, make sure it is designed and tested to be compatible with it. Ford tells us that they have seen no problems with most child seats out there. Before we look at the details, let's take a quick sweep across the dashboard so you can see how this all works together. This is a very European themed interior, which I think is a very good thing. It reminds me an awful lot of Volkswagen and Audi products. Up front, we have height adjustable seatbelts for both the driver and the front passenger, and we have these 4-way adjustable headrests. They tilt forward like that, as you can see, ratchet in different positions. They also go up and down. Moving over to the front doors, we find a large percentage of soft touch plastics. You will find hard touch plastics lower in the door in the storage cubby right here with the bottle holder towards the speaker grille and this front portion of the armrest. The back portion of the armrest is a very soft touch plastic. Helping improve elbow room is this little cutout right there on the B pillar, which does make it seem like that front door goes further rearward. Zooming in closer on the detail on the front door, you can see that Ford has done an excellent job in terms of fit and finish. These power door lock buttons that are integrated right there are the front speaker grille. The faux metallic finish options as well as the faux wood trim is very nicely done in the Fusion. Moving over to the center of the dashboard, we would have a center channel speaker in the up-level models. Our particular model does not have the optional My Ford Touch system, so we do have this basic Ford Sync system. The basic system has an optical disc player right down here below. We have a large number of buttons all the way across. These are direct access buttons on the left side of the display. We have the phone number buttons for the integrated Bluetooth phone interface right there. These are contextual buttons right across the top here, and this is a navigation joystick button. Dedicated track forward, backward, and hang-up pickup buttons for our Bluetooth phone, power volume, and 2 knob right over there. Even though this is a large number of buttons, it was fairly easy to use once I got the hang of it. It does offer full voice commands of your USB or media device, very much like My Ford Touch and the other Ford Sync products. Below that, we have this very European-themed manual climate control system. This is a single-zone system. You control where the air comes out of the vents by pressing these little buttons that sort of have a diagram of the human body. We have temperature control right over here, and then our fan control right down here. Our particular model has the optional heated front seats. Below the climate control, we have a storage cubby right down here. It is accessible from the sides, and you will find a 12-volt power outlet right there on the passenger side. Since there is no manual transmission available in the United States for the 2015 model year, every vehicle will have this standard automatic shifter. Sport mode is all the way down, and then you have a manual mode via these buttons right over here on the side. To the left of the shifter, you'll find the lever for the electric parking brake. We also have the auto start-stop system disable button right over here because ours does have that option. If we had the autonomous parking option, you'd also have another button right over there to engage or disengage that system. Below the shifter, we have these two large cup holders. Had no problem fitting these large takeout drinks right there. They're the same size. And then inside this storage compartment in the center of the dashboard, we have a USB input, an auxiliary input, 12-volt power outlet, and a very deep storage cubby. If you get the optional My Ford Touch infotainment system, you'll find some additional inputs right there next to that USB port, including a second USB port. Push button start is optional on the Fusion. Our particular model does not have it, so we have this very standard switchblade key right there. Moving over to the driver's side, we have two slightly different instrument clusters depending on whether or not you get the My Ford Touch system. Since we don't have the My Ford Touch system, we have a single LCD right there in the center between the speedometer and the tachometer, and we have analog gauges for engine temperature and fuel level. That multifunction display is controlled via this four-way joystick with OK button on the left side of the steering wheel. On the right side of the steering wheel, we have a mirror image joystick button arrangement. If you got the My Ford Touch system, then that would actually control the display on the right side of the speedometer, whereas the other one would control the display on the left side of the speedometer. Because we do not have My Ford Touch in our particular vehicle, this actually controls the radio head unit. In this multi-information display, you can get things like 2 trip computers. You can also get an average fuel economy that is separate from that trip computer display. You can see we've been averaging 30.3 miles per gallon. You can also get a display where it will show you your average fuel economy, instant fuel economy, and your distance to empty on one screen. If we go back, you can also see certain vehicle information on here, so you can see what our auto start-stop system is doing. You can see the status of your MyKey system. The MyKey system is kind of unique. It allows you to set certain settings on your car and certain limits on your car for people that may be driving it like your kids. You can find more information on that on Ford's website. You can also get a system check and see how your vehicle is performing. Oil life, washer fluid, doors, brake life, etc. You can change things like your easy entry exit seat, how your fuel economy history is displayed, lighting preferences, lock preferences, etc. Moving out to the steering wheel, you can see that we have this almost 3-spoke steering wheel. These are sort of 2 small spokes with a small grip section right between them. Sport grips up top. Ours is leather wrapped. With those 2 button modules that I showed you earlier on the left and on the right of the steering wheel. Over here on this side of the steering wheel, we have our cruise control buttons. If we did have the optional radar cruise control, you'd find some slightly different buttons on the vehicle. Over here we have the media control buttons, forward, backward, hang up, pickup, voice command, mute, and volume up, down. Because of the overall length of the Fusion and the very economically shaped front and rear ends where we maximize space, we have a very large and accommodating trunk. If I open this up, you'll see that I have a 24-inch and a 26-inch roller bag in here. They fit very easily in the trunk. The important thing to keep in mind with the Fusion, however, is that we don't have a trunk where you put things in from the top. You really put things in from the back like this, because the trunk lid is only about 9 inches long right there in the top. Still, you can fit this 26-inch roller bag and child seats very easily in that direction. You can also slide them into the back in that fashion. Very unlike the Toyota Camry and the Nissan Altima, however, you cannot put a 24-inch roller bag in that position and still close the trunk. If we lift up the cargo load floor, you will find a donut spare tire, and Ford has hidden the hinges behind these panels right here in the trunk, so they don't impact your cargo. It does reduce the cargo space just a little bit, however. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, the Fusion scores 9 out of 10 points very easily because this is a large and accommodating trunk. We lose a few points because we can't put 24-inch roller bags in the vertical position, but we gain most of those points back for having a very large and very sturdy handle right here on the inside of the trunk lid. Most mid-size sedans skip this handle for cost-cutting reasons, leaving you to paw on the outside painted areas or pull off interior trim bits to help you close that trunk. One of the nice features that Ford is continuing to offer in the United States is this keyless entry pad you can see right here. It's no longer an actual button pad, they're now actually touch buttons on the vehicle. It allows you to enter a code to get in the vehicle or to lock the doors from the outside. If you want to lock the car, you just press the last 2 buttons right here on the car at the same time and it will lock the car. If you want to unlock the car, you just enter your security code, which can be changed in the vehicle, and then it will go ahead and unlock the door for you. When it comes to acceleration, the Fusion scores between 6 and 8 out of 10 points. 6 out of 10 points with the base engine, 7 out of 10 points with this 1.5-liter turbocharged engine. I'll also call the hybrids in that 7 out of 10 point score range. 8 out of 10 points if you get the optional 2-liter turbo. The V6 Chrysler 200 as well as the V6 Nissan Altima are significantly faster than the 2-liter turbo version of this. The V6 version of the Chrysler 200 is due largely to the 9-speed automatic transmission and its very low first gear, and over on the Nissan side it's due to the CVT and its ability to constantly vary the ratio to the optimum point for that V6 engine. When it comes to 0 to 60 times, we scored 7.6 seconds in this 1.5-liter turbocharged model, which is exactly the same as the 1.6-liter turbocharged model that it replaces. You'll also note that this 1.5-liter engine is a little bit faster to 60 than the 1.8-liter turbocharged engine that you'll find in the Volkswagen Passat. When it comes to handling, there's no question that the Fusion and the Mazda 6 are the two top entries in this segment. I give them both 10 out of 10 points. Even in the model we're taking a look at right here, which has eco tires on it, they're also a little bit narrower than you'll find in some of the other entries in this segment and a little bit taller as well, so you get a little bit more rubber on the tires. We still have absolutely excellent handling behavior in the Fusion. The biggest thing about the Fusion, which can also be said about the Mazda 6, is it's not just about the handling numbers itself, and that'd be road grip. It's about the way this vehicle feels while it's handling. The Fusion feels very stable, very planted, and very competent at all times out on the road. Likewise, the braking is very stable in this vehicle. I'll give it 9 out of 10 points. I did find the Mazda 6 to be the better braking vehicle in this segment, but it's not by that big of a difference. Interestingly enough, while many mid-size sedans frequently only get 1 or 2 areas where they score 10 out of 10 points or 9 out of 10 points, the Fusion has 3: handling, braking, and cabin noise. We came in at 68 decibels in this vehicle at 50 miles an hour, which is a luxury car level of quietness. Keep in mind that we are in the SE trim, which is one of the lower end trims of the Ford Fusion, and we still get this very quiet score. Now you may notice that the titanium trims with wider tires will give you a little bit more road noise, especially if you get those larger wheels. Even though we have that 10 out of 10 handling score, I still give this vehicle 8 out of 10 points when it comes to the ride, and that's largely due to the suspension tuning as well as the smaller tires and smaller wheels that we have on this particular Fusion. If you get the 18-inch wheels, then you'll find that the ride goes down a decent amount in the Fusion because you have less rubber to help cushion the ride. When it comes to fuel economy, I'll give this 8 out of 10 points. 9 and 10 out of 10 points go to the entries in this segment that have hybrids, including the hybrid version of the Ford Fusion, but this 1.5-liter turbocharged model got very good fuel economy for itself considering the performance we also get in this model. I've been averaging just under 31 miles per gallon in very mixed driving over about 690 miles. Unlike some of Ford's recent vehicles, this does not use their power shift dual clutch gearbox. It still uses a traditional 6-speed automatic transmission, so shifts are smooth and they feel very normal and very much like every other entry in this segment. The optional all-wheel drive system available in the Fusion operates very much like the rest of the all-wheel drive systems in this category. It predominantly sends the power to the front axle, although it can send up to 50% of the power to the rear axle whenever it wants to, assuming that there is no slip across the front axle. If there is slip across the front axle, then the system can, in theory, send up to about 90% of the power to the rear axle. Overall, the Fusion feels like much more of a complete vehicle than the Mazda 6. The Mazda 6 handles very well, but it's a little bit rough around the edges in certain other ways. It's definitely lacking in the infotainment system. It doesn't give you the same cabin noise score or the same ride score or even the same fuel economy necessarily that we get in this Ford Fusion. The Ford Fusion just seems like a more complete package in that respect. This is actually somewhat similar to the Chrysler 200, although in many of these scoring areas, the Chrysler 200 scored a little bit lower than this. It's a little bit less expensive, but the scores are indeed a little bit lower. So this does get better handling, better braking, and better cabin noise scores in the Chrysler 200, but again, that 200 is a little bit less expensive, but very similarly themed. If you're after a mid-size sedan with a very European feel, the Fusion really is the vehicle for you, because the North American Passat is not the same as the European Passat anymore, and it was specifically designed with American tastes in mind. It got much larger and much softer in this last generation, much harder plastics on the inside, and it doesn't handle quite as well as the last generation either. It feels very much more like a Volkswagen version of a Toyota Camry or a Honda Accord, which is not necessarily a bad thing if that's what you're after. That's probably why Volkswagen sales have been so much better lately. Speaking of the Camry and Accord, we'll tackle the Camry first. The Fusion versus the Camry, this is a much more dynamic vehicle. It's also much quieter, and I think it actually had a slightly better ride out on the road. I'm not talking necessarily about ride smoothness, I'm talking about composure specifically here. This suspension never feels unsettled over broken pavement, and the Camry sometimes can. The Camry's pretty good, but doesn't have the same polish that we get in this Ford. Without a doubt, this handles better than the Camry, it brakes better than the Camry, and the cabin is also quieter than the Camry. Versus the Honda Accord, things are a little bit closer. The Honda Accord is very consistent across the board, but it scores a little bit lower in this in terms of general dynamics out on the road, except for the fuel economy, where that hybrid model really comes in very high. Even though we have better torque figures in the 2-liter turbocharged version of the Fusion, the V6 version of the Accord still scooted to 60 a little bit faster. Cabin noise is a little bit higher in the Accord, and overall in the drive section it doesn't score quite as well as the Ford Fusion. However, that Honda Accord scores higher in other areas for me, but I'll cover that a little bit later. If you can fit your family in the back seat, the Fusion is definitely the kind of vehicle that you can have an awful lot of fun out on these winding mountain roads, where you can sort of maximize the seasickness for your passengers. You can probably fit 4 people back there and get them seasick all at the same time. Pricing on the Fusion is much broader than many of the mid-size sedan entries because the Fusion, like the Chrysler 200, goes an awful lot higher than most of the mid-size sedans. Things start at $22,010 for the base S model that gets you sync and power windows, along with a few other nice standard features. If you fully option up your Ford Fusion, you'll end up right around $37,000. The SE model that we're taking a look at right here started at $23,545 and gives you nice standard features like satellite radio, power driver's seat, as well as the keyless entry system right over there on the driver's door. It also allows you to option up more options than you can in that S model. So if you want to add things like the 1.5-liter turbocharged engine, 2-liter turbocharged engine, or all-wheel drive, you can get them in the SE model. The 1.5-liter turbocharged model starts at $24,340. If you want the 2-liter turbocharged model, it's $26,325. If you want to add all-wheel drive to it, you can only do that in that 2-liter turbocharged model, and that means it's $28,325. That means that the all-wheel drive Ford Fusion, like the Chrysler 200 in all-wheel drive form, is considerably more expensive than the only other all-wheel drive entry in this segment, the Subaru Legacy. The biggest difference between the Fusion and the other leaders in this segment are that Ford allows you a wide variety of standalone options, and the other manufacturers tend to really like bundled option packages. Standalone options on this SE model include a $150 heated steering wheel. We also get the $520 optional push-button start. You can get red leather for $795. Navigation can be added for another $795. For $895, you can get the self-parking system. Ford has one of the best self-parking systems available at the moment. Our particular model has the optional $295 start-stop system. On the safety side, you can pay $150 and get the optional inflatable rear seat belts. For $1,200, you can option up blind spot warning as well as lane departure mitigation. $995 buys you the optional moonroof. If you add all those options on a 2-liter turbocharged version of the SE model, you'll end up at $32,445, which is a little bit higher than many of the options in this segment end. $30,000 is about as expensive as many of the mid-size sedans in America get unless you're taking a look at the hybrid versions. Oddly enough, $30,000 is right where the titanium model of the Fusion starts, $30,290. If you fully load your titanium up with all those options, all-wheel drive, self-parking, improved leather on the inside, and that touchscreen infotainment system, you'll end up at just under $37,000. The Fusion ends up about $1,200 less than a similarly configured Honda Accord. The important thing to keep in mind is that we have this 1.5-liter turbocharged engine right in the middle of the lineup, and that's very different than the other entries in this segment, because most of the other entries have just 2 engine options, or possibly 3 if you include their hybrid system. This one really has 4, and that 1.5-liter turbocharged engine is quite an interesting option. It gives you an awful lot more torque, an awful lot better drivability than you get in your average 2 or 2.5-liter engine that most vehicles start with in this segment. The Fusion is about $1,000 less than a similarly configured Toyota Camry, and when you take a look at this 1.5-liter turbocharged engine, it still averages about $200 less once you factor in all the additional feature content you get in the Ford. When comparing the Fusion to the Nissan Altima, things are very, very similar at the bottom end of the scale. So if you're taking a look at the base version of the Fusion with the naturally aspirated engine and the base version of the Nissan Altima, they're just within a few $100s of each other. If we're taking a look at this 1.5-liter turbocharged model, then it's about $2,000 more than a similarly equipped 2.4-liter Nissan Altima. However, we get more standard equipment in this vehicle that helps balance that price a little bit out. You end up within a few $100s of that Nissan Altima. But we also get improved drivability. The one thing we don't get, however, is improved performance, because 0 to 60 performance in the Nissan Altima with that 2.4-liter engine is still a little bit better than the 1.5-liter turbocharged Fusion. The reason for that is the CVT. It can really help improve acceleration with that base engine because it can constantly vary its ratio. Although the Mazda 6 is not at the top of the sales chart like the others are, I'm adding it to this comparison because they remind me an awful lot of one another. Both the Mazda 6 and the Ford Fusion are excellent handling vehicles. They're also incredibly attractive vehicles. In previous generations, the Ford Fusion and the Mazda 6 compared very well with one another, but that's not going on anymore, especially at the higher end trims in the Ford Fusion. The Ford is about $1,000 less than the Mazda, and we get more equipment in this version than we do in the Mazda. You also only find one engine in the Mazda 6 at this time, and we have more engines to choose from in this vehicle with more power or better fuel economy depending on what you're after. The additional engine options mean that the 1.5-liter turbocharged engine that we have under this hood has improved drivability over the Mazda 6's only engine available. And if you get the 2-liter turbocharged engine, you get improved drivability and greatly improved performance versus that Mazda 6. Similarly, I'm including the Chrysler 200 not because it sells the best in this segment, but because the Chrysler 200 and the Ford Fusion remind me an awful lot of each other. The Chrysler 200 is based on a European design. It's a little bit narrower than the Fusion, but they have the same kind of restrictions right back here in the rear seat area as one another. So they both have kind of cramped headroom in the back seat. They both have excellent driving dynamics, and they both span the difference from about $22,000 to about $37,000 at the top end of this segment. They both have luxury options that you don't find in the rest of the mid-sized competition. The Chrysler represents the value option in the luxury end of this mid-size sedan segment. You get the same kind of feature content that we get in this vehicle at a slightly lower price. We also get a 9-speed automatic transmission, not a 6-speed, and we get a V6 under the hood instead of a 2-liter turbocharged engine. However, I think that this is more attractive than the Chrysler 200, and I also think that the interior is a little bit more comfortable than the Chrysler 200. The toughest competition for the Ford Fusion at the top end of its price range is the Lincoln MKZ, because the Lincoln MKZ has more standard feature content that you don't find in the Ford Fusion, like LED headlamps, etc. We also get a unique look on the outside, an improved dealer experience, and an additional year of warranty. When you factor in all those standard features and that additional year of warranty, then a top-end, fully loaded Ford Fusion comes in right about the same price as a similarly equipped Lincoln MKZ. The 2015 Fusion is one of my favorite vehicles in this mid-size sedan segment, but it's not my absolute favorite. That would still be the Honda Accord Hybrid. You get almost 50 miles per gallon in that Honda Accord, you get a more practical back seat, and you get a very nice and comfortable interior. It obviously isn't as attractive as the Ford Fusion, it's not as sexy, it doesn't handle as well either, but the Ford Fusion lacks the rear seat accommodations that I find important in a mid-size sedan. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Ford Fusion. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos, over at Twitter as AlexandAutos, and you can always email your questions to alex@alexandautos.com. I'll see you next week.